I think all the panelists deserve another round of applause. Now I invite Ramesh to come and moderate the Q&A. If there are some more questions, please hand them around. We'll pick it up.
We'll spend some 15 more minutes than what we had scheduled. But I think the session was really, really interesting, and the Q&A will be even more interesting. I think we can spend 30 minutes. We can overshoot by around 15 minutes for the session. I have few very basic questions that I would like to start with for the panelists, especially for the industry practitioners. People are asking questions in terms of how profitable is vocational training at this stage. Why have you all entered the sector at this point in time when most industry leaders are saying that it's a very difficult sector? We don't know how we're going to make money from the segment. There are a lot of other interesting opportunities available. Even higher education is booming. So why is it that Manipal Group has entered vocational training? Why is it that Career Launcher has entered vocational training? And why should entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs from ISB take up vocational training compared to other hot sectors like telecom or other sectors which may be there? So,
Can I take this?
Yeah.
Essentially, we've spent the last 1.5 years. Archana has been worked very closely with us, on building this plan, built a 5-year plan. And the way the plan looks is that it's a business that can generate, that has the potential to generate, if I just give you number terms, potential to generate anywhere between 35 to 40% EBITDA, levels at a year 4, year 5, kind of level. It has the potential right now to turn around in year 2. And how does all this happen? And basically, it's predicated by the fact that you're able to kind of train and employ 1 million learners over the next 5 years at a typical price point of anywhere between 8 and 10,000. Okay, at a price point like this, there is a potential for this business to generate anywhere between close to a 40% EBITDA level, which is a very, very healthy business to be in. But the catch still remains that where are you going to get those 1 million learners? And and once we answer that, it's a profitable business. So that's why I think more and more people should get into it.
Maybe your comments.
I have one thing to add here. MES. Again, Government of India initiated in the short duration courses. It has a rate of being reimbursed for successful candidates at the rate of 15 rupees per hour. Now, if you consider a full-time course, if you run a full-time course in any of the training center, it would be roughly 120 hours of training for each student, which means a revenue of around 1,800 rupees per student per month. That can be taken from MES. Other schemes are, may have even more amounts in terms of Ministry of Rural Development has such a more amount. Dilip was saying that it's around 10,000 rupees probably per student for maybe 3 months training course or 2.5 months training course. In our experience, what we have seen is even if you put every expense and if you work a little innovatively, you can actually make a 40% operating profit on this on each month on month. But the essential thing is that the efficiency has to be achieved, and you have to have economy of scale built into that. But it is very much possible to make a 40% operating margin on a level of 1,800 rupees cost per student per month.
Are there any?
I think as far as profitability is concerned in this segment, I think it's as good as asking a question, why won't you do anything else, but why just vocational training? And of course, there is always internal motivation factors. And like Career Launcher, they have taken a threefold approach to this business, right? They're looking for some sort of an inclusive aspect as well. So there always that plays in. But coming down to hard numbers, there is potential if you are. I mentioned that your profitability of your business clearly stems from your center level scale. And that's ultimately, that's how you will build it across your vast network, whether it is like 400 centers that NIIT has today, or you have maybe the 40 odd that India Skills has reached in the last 1 year. So, I mean, the Hari's point on, although is very, very valid, is that all of this is fine. There is potential to reach 40%, but where will those students walk in from is always the concern. And I think already a lot of people have mentioned about the policy issues and which are being considered. And given that that goes through, I don't see why there should not be a feasible or attractive business for anyone.
It has its coffers full until when it believes that this is, this is supposed to be done. MORD probably every year just supports about 2 lakh kids, but that's not the scale that we're talking about. So market mechanisms are yet to sort of emerge in that space, and that's the key breakthrough that we're all looking for, perhaps.
Let me take a different dimension of the answer. Is that, I talked about EduBridge and iStar. We asked both the entrepreneurs if they want to take equity. Okay? And he said we'll take equity at par in grass. Grass today is 10 rupee share is valued at 145. And both iStar and EduBridge said, yeah, NSDC fine, you take equity, but we'll give you convertible debentures. And I just asked the question, what do you think will be the valuation in 3 years when you convert? They said anywhere from 250 to 300 rupees. Centum recently gave a 10 rupee share for 1,000 for 813 rupees to an international PE. So that's the other side. Existing businesses. Let's not talk about it.
So the discussion, there are 2 broad themes that I want to touch upon. The first one, we looked at profitability. We'll have some more questions. But the other question was more from the industry perspective. So we need trained talent basically for the industry. Like industry is the ultimate consumer for the government and all the stakeholders. So one thing I wanted to understand is the market is working right now in a way because industry is getting what they want. They don't want to get involved. We have to coax them into getting in. So in a way we are pushing customer a product which they don't want at this stage. So conceptually that is what we're trying to do. Is it that we see a huge opportunity and the government needs to do something about the labor and we've not created enough jobs for them and hence we are pushing this agenda? Why is this agenda taken up right now? The industry doesn't need it. Why are we pushing it so much? Like that's one question that we want to understand from all the panelists.
Well, I don't agree that industry doesn't need it, actually. The point is really that industry has no choice today. And we can't keep blaming industry for what they're doing today. As I kept saying, they can't shut their business because there isn't a sustained supply chain of people that we have today. Look at these employment companies, okay? We are actually in the process of setting up extremely strong, good, what are called employment exchanges. And this is something that I would share a little down the line. We've got a great team that we put in place who's going to set up an employment exchange. This business is actually about employment exchanges. It's not about training, okay? It's not about... So what are the employment exchanges we're doing till now? For example, let me take a company like TeamLease, right? What was TeamLease doing till now? It used to get hordes of people. It's got 90,000 people on its rolls. It's the biggest contributor to Provident Fund in the private sector. Right? That's TeamLease for us today. What do? Is to get people, assess them, and push them into a job even if that guy was not ready for the job, right? In spite of having an assessed, certified person. Over a period of time, TeamLease realized that what's going to happen is that people are not staying in the jobs. Why are people not staying in the jobs? Because they are not productive. It's not because they're getting 200 rupees more outside, somewhere else. They're not leaving because of that. Some of them are, but most of them are leaving because they're not productive. And when I say not productive, when they join a retail company, the guy has to stand the whole day. He's not used to it. He's not been told that he's got to do that. 3 customers come and yell at him. Next day he's gone. He's not productive and hence he's not staying. So longevity in staying comes out of productivity. So why I'm saying this is because industry is desperately seeking it actually. Because what industry is facing is huge churn. People are leaving. Why are people leaving? I'm talking bottom of pyramid. Because they're not productive. Why are they not productive? Because they're not skilled. The problem is that there isn't enough of supply chain. So the chicken and egg, who's going to come and break that chicken and egg? This situation, right? Somebody has to come and say, listen, here are the first 10,000 people, skilled people, take them. Only then it's going to break. So what is India Skills supposed to do? Train 10,000 people free of cost and prove to the industry that it works, and and there's a change. Tomorrow industry will stop, but you need to invest in it. So it's not true that they don't want it. There's a burning need. The point is that they're obviously not willing to stop their business.
See, the business of skilling starts from whatever points were said. If you sum up all that, industry needs people and people need jobs. That means people need industry. And the conversion only pays for the training cost. Now, in one of the conferences, people are talking of attrition. Now, attrition is nothing but robbing people. When you rob people from the other company, then they leave, like IBM, the best planning they have is put a big newspaper ad, big one, and say we are the best in the world. And then they will later on complain about attrition. Their whole planning for manpower is only attrition, leave somewhere and come to me. So the point here is, are you generating the skill? You are shifting people from here to there, it will increase 100 rupees, then there to there 100 rupees. It goes on shifting like this. The cost, because there is no generation. So industry will come to its senses. In understanding, they are jacking up the cost because they are not generating, they are not training, they are not skilling. And definitely they will come to the senses, if not today, in the next 3 to 5 years. If you start your business now, you will be in great business, one of the greatest businesses of the century, that is skilling. Thank you.
I do need to take exception.
I also think the contrary to what you said, because where my auto industry had the Auto Industry Skill Council, which is now being funded by SEC, came out of requirement from industry. So it was that they needed technicians, they needed auto sales people, and they needed drivers. And there was no way, of getting the numbers. Even though you can walk in to the RTOs to get licenses, the whole RTO system in the country, even with the 1 minute license, cannot cater to the needs of the driving industry. So there is a huge shortage out there. And what's happening, and is not good, is a lot of people who have the capability to invest in automation and mechanization are taking that route because they find that people are not available. So there's this, in some sectors you might see jobless growth, but given the availability of skilled people, that's going to turn around. And in the front end, you can't automate a retail store. You can't automate a driver. So there is a shortage, and the skills gap surveys are actual demonstration of the shortage that industry will face in sector after sector.
I have 3 more questions, and we throw it to open to the audience. An offshoot to this question. So, Hari, you mentioned that it's more like an employment exchange which needs to work. Like I read an article about Harvard Business School. They mentioned is that they have they have a list of students which they've given an admit to, and 50% are asked to just go on a holiday for 2 years and come back, show up for the end of the year for the graduation ceremony. And if all of them are put up for placements, recruiters wouldn't even care whether they've attended classes or not attended classes. All they're expecting is the filtering process, trying to understand what the skills of the candidates are all about. So is it that's the big issue here, that industry doesn't know what skills are available with which individual and where do they exist in this country? Like if we solve that problem, do you think training will take care of itself?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And that's why we talk about an employment exchange. The model is employment exchange is a term used, but it's a lot more. What does the exchange do actually? One of the biggest problems that industry is facing, while I was saying that trespassers are hired, wrong skills are hired. When wrong skills are hired, unproductive, and hence the guy leaves. You also have a problem in the training setup. Trespassers also are hired for training. And when I say that, today, all of us sitting here are so desperate for getting people into our classrooms that anybody who walks in is taken in, irrespective of us knowing whether the guy is capable of doing the job which we're going to put him onto, in spite of the training. So this exchange actually what it does is it assesses a skill at the supply side. It creates a demand engine which has all the job roles defined. It's called a job role defined. So you have this knowledge skill matrix which is defined for a job role. And what there's a matching engine in between that it does is basically matches this. It's a very intelligent matching engine that matches this. If there is a mismatch, it is pushed to the skilling engine. This is how the exchange works. And when this works well, an industry gets a certified guy. And when I say a certified guy, he's certified for the job. So if you put somebody in a retail store, you can be sure that the guy will work in the retail store. Then you can go ahead and commit things like longevity. I can go and tell a customer that he'll last with you for 6 months. If he doesn't, I'll pay you back some money, etc., etc. So this is what it does. So certainly one thing the industry is trying to grapple with is that how do I convert that skill requirement into the training program, and so the training program delivers that skill. You can't do it till you have an assessment in the beginning which assesses what that person is all about. So that's what the chain does actually.
So what do we fix first? We fix the assessment, skill standards and the information system first and then have increase in supply, or we start with the supply of training providers? Like, what do you think will work better? Or
it's not a business process. Okay, there's a current shortage. People don't have people, and even if you create capacity today, it's only going to, if you start a class 1 school today, it'll take 12 years to reach full capacity. So you have to do both things simultaneously. There's no one correct way of doing it. You've got to create capacity, because if you have to move from 4.3 million to 40 million, you can't do it. It has both of it done simultaneously.
Completely agree with you. So the point is, you got to do both together. There's no question about it. You can't wait for an employment exchange, assessment models to come, get fine-tuned, and we need to work closely with industry and make sure that these things evolve. But we need to keep this in the back of our mind. We need to provide right jobs as we go along. But right now, trespassers are trained. Trespassers are hired. So as much as they're hired, they're trained also. We must try and make sure that it's going to be much better than, if it's at a level which is -10 today, you can bring it to 0. It's far better than -10. And this is really what Sanjay was telling me, who looks after, the vocational business. What are we talking about? I mean, we can keep improving our processes. If -10 becomes 0, it's damn good. If 0 becoming 10, we need all this.
I think you saw 2 good examples of what need to be done. You heard Jitendra talk about how they're doing village to village to identify people, because a lot of people don't know that they're capable of learning a skill and there's a job next door. Okay? And you heard placement, right? Even a business school, that placement cell determines their credibility in the market eventually. So every skill training center, be it a 10-person skill training center, a 20-person skill center, has to have a very strong backward and forward linkage. And whatever we've talked about here, if you create that backward and forward linkage, right, it's done. That's all. There's no policy intervention, nothing. You can just the backward and forward intervention, and take a conscious thing that you're going to get the system sustainable. You're not going to, I don't mean any disrespect to all of you who are doing MURD, MES, but this is like the old license for arbitrage. Know how to work the system, get in, get a grant to do skill training. I got to change. We've got to bring 1991 into that.
I really agree with Mr. Kalra on that. It's not sustainable. Your government projects are beyond a point. I mean, the government can't be funding such issues. It needs to be self-sustainable. And the only way to get self-sustainable is when the B2C retail models start evolving. When a person comes, pays on his own, or there are banking agencies that come and pay, then it really becomes sustainable then. Brands get built out of B2C models, retail models, not out of government funding. So if companies like us are trying to build brands around vocational training, it can only happen through the B2C route or the retail route.
Just one bit of information might help all of you. That we've talked to basics, and in all of the 250 centers, they're willing to extend microfinance loans to people looking for work. So if you want, we can make that connect.
I think let me add a point here. See, clarifying government funding. See, government funding is always a startup, and the scale up has to be done by the stakeholders. And there I agree with Dilip that unless if that placement fee what you suggested, that would remove every disease and probably put this particular thing in the front line of business. But then that's going to take some time, because everybody feels people are available on the roadside in India. We have 1.2 billion population, so everybody sees they'll come in any time. You get the numbers. Yeah, that's possibly going to change. The other thing, in a lighter vein, the respectability of skilling has to increase. One lady in one of the conferences just stood up and said, how does government change social acceptability, to skilling? I said, if all the girls decide to marry skilled guys, it will happen overnight. So, we have to look at it both ends, as he said. And if you work out the, both the linkages, I think it should work.
You need to complete that. Actually, not only, they prefer to marry an unemployed graduate than an employed vocational guy. And if you go to a village and you have an unemployed graduate, he sits in the charpai, and a person, let's say, is working in Hero Honda, this is a real life example. The person earns roughly 35,000 rupees a month, but in the village he sit on the floor. So the role of NGOs, the role of social service organizations in the area of skill will dramatically change, because they have to see that as speakers. There's a very good model in the audience. We must talk about it. We talk about it as a whole let our state secret.
I don't know, we want to coach from ISB. That idea will talk.
There's another guy sitting behind him.
So, two more questions and take a few more questions to the audience. Technology, people talk about it being a great enabler and reducing cost. From what we understood from Career Launcher as well as Jitendra here about the Dr. Reddy Foundation operations, the no capex model of hiring a classroom and having trainers to train with curriculum, that is working at a very cheap cost anyways. And for technology, you have to invest an large amount of money upfront. So do you think if you're looking at a very highly fragmented market, we'll have 100, 500 training providers functioning in the country, looking at different geographies and sectors, technology will be able to play a big role in increasing access and reducing costs here?
Yes, as the experience of Career Launcher has been with the test prep business, technology has indeed been a great enabler, and it has in fact led to quite a substantial cost cutting and increasing efficiency and other things. But as I said a little earlier in my presentation, one of the key differences between the test prep and the vocational right now is probably the standardization, the lack of standardization. Vocational education essentially is today very contextual. So you cannot probably have a universal solution for all different geographies where technology can replace or supplement the existing models. But in the times to come, when all these efforts that are being put in by NSDC, by other players, of the sector skill councils, for these assessment bodies, qualifications frameworks, I'm very sure that once they come through, once that is done, then it can play a much better, a much higher level role, the technology per se, in this space.
Sorry, I just addressed this in the direct conference day before, and I'll tell you how technology can play a role. Current student-teacher ratio in this is 1:20. Can technology take it to 1:150? There are companies actually listed in the chart which you showed, different sizes, for doing that. The second is, imagine that if this was a class size, or Dr. Reddy was doing, the foundation was doing this class, and it's actually a class like this, and each one of you were connected with the globally best vocational training provider and doing that course at the same time. The third, which is different use of technology by industry can play. Today it is theoretically possible to increase the ITI intake by 500% or 5 times. Okay? There's no rocket science. All we want to say is that the ITIs are located in industrial clusters. Only theory will be taught in ITIs. The practicals will be done in companies. Right? So a group of companies, every 5th day they'll send a person to the ITI, and there'll be people who will be trained on soft skills and others will be required. Sitting today with zero investment, only something, you can actually multiply the ITI intake by 5 times. You don't need that 15,000 crores that you're looking at, 1,500 new ITIs and 15,000 new skill centers. But the low cost model of rent, there's enough brick and mortar. You use ITIs in the evening, 400,000 capacity can be created. If you get into all the schools, you don't need to set up a single skill center anywhere. You can rent places. The Pratham model which we are funding is they're actually going one step ahead of doctors, not hiring this thing, but they're taking 4 tents and plus 1 for cook food, and they're going mobile to mobile.
So, any feedback on use of technology for the model that you all are adopting? Do you think it will be feasible?
My response actually is very similar to what Sachin said. Our experience is very similar to what. See, for us, and center in Northeast is very different from center in Bihar and the center in J&K, right? And it's very contextual. The models have to be modified. The curriculum has to be modified. So what we teach in English in Bihar is different from what we teach English in Kerala, for example. So unless we are able to move to the next stage of standardization, taking context also into account, it will be a little challenging. But surely there are opportunities going forward. There are opportunities.
We have 5 more minutes, a couple of questions from the audience. It's okay. If you want to ask, because we had a lot of questions, if you want to ask anything directly.
What's the general cost structure of vocational education? Like, what are the cost drivers and which drivers are the overall costs generally most sensitive to? And this is a general question. The cost drivers for vocational education.
I think there are a couple, 3 biggest cost drivers, or elements that contribute to the cost part. There are actually 3 of them. The first one and the biggest one and the most, and something that you spend very disproportionately today is on student acquisition, and that's called marketing. Right? You will budget for spending, ideally, on a 10,000 price point, your cost per student on marketing cannot be more than $1,000. Ideally, and that's when you make your 40% EBITDA. The moment it becomes 5,000 rupees spent on a 10,000 rupee course, then you need funding. So marketing is the biggest cost today. Second is basically rentals, which is your cost of hiring, places to actually do your training, and the third is faculty. So these 3 actually contribute to everything else is kind of quite incidental.
In the kind of model that we run, which is basically, minimizing costs everywhere, and I'm again coming from the government-sponsored projects per se. From that perspective, the single most biggest cost and the single, the most key factor in all this is faculty. At the end of the day, most of these projects revolve around the faculty. If your faculty is good, there's a very high probability of the program being successful. If you cannot get the faculty or the trainer right, then there is every chance that whatever else you may give, the program will fail. So from that perspective, trainer, the faculty, I would say, is the most key element as far as the government programs and rural, semi-urban programs are concerned.
In our experience also, 60% of the cost, for example, is the trainer cost, right? And about 15% is the rental, 15% is the computer cost, the computer rental cost. And we have some good experience on acquisition cost being brought down. Actually, we have actually incentives rolled out to the staff for reducing the batch-to-batch gap. So one batch is over, the next batch starts. The time that we allow is 25 days, but if you crack it in 7 days, there's an incentive to be earned. If you crack it in 15 days, And very innovative mechanisms have actually been brought in by the trainers themselves, where it's about the boy from one village being asked, that there'll be a friends meet. You bring 2 friends from your village, where they come and sit in the class for some time, they get to see what had happened. So various different models have been tried, and I think going forward, these mechanisms will have to be strengthened, because actually there's nobody to pay for acquisition of a aspirant. So a whole lot of social mechanisms have to be used in acquiring these aspirants. But largely the cost driver is the trainers, largely, the cost of trainers.
I have a question to all the 3 of you who said trainers. Will you be willing to pay a placement fee if people were to place trainers with you?
See, we actually, in acquiring trainers, we spend a lot of money, in terms of, for example, our HR recruitment costs, their induction costs. So if there is an agency which trains trainers, and is willing to charge a fee, I think yes, we'll be willing to pay, surely, because we have those costs with us.
This appears to be quite a straightforward question with a straightforward answer. That yes, we will be willing to pay, but unfortunately, I would say the way I see it, and probably in my context and many other agencies' context, the agency will be willing to pay for the trainer only if it is mandated. Till the time it is not mandated, yes, many people will say they will pay, but I don't know whether actually people will end up paying. If it says that the trainer has to be this certificate, that is what will, initiate the whole process. Value will be realized over a period of time. That market building will happen over a period of time. But initially there has to be, some kind of mandate, some kind of guidance from the government or someone who will have to guide this, at least in the beginning. This is what
I just want to build up on Hari's point, actually, just going back a little bit, is it depends on which model you're following. Hari's point is very valid for the B2C model. If you are a retail kind of trainer, you have to spend on marketing. Again, come back to NIIT. Do you know how much NIIT spends annually in marketing in India? 70 crore rupees. And they are the largest guys. They still have to spend 70 crore rupees. That's about 17-18% of their revenues that they're spending on marketing. Also, if you just go back to the previous question where you had asked about what should we do first, should we educate the industry, the answers are all, it's all a marketing effort here. You have to market the vocational training segment to the industry. You have to spend, so it starts not only from the government, it starts from every single person. It starts from India Skills Operators, it will start from NSDC, it will start from the government. That's the whole marketing, it's money that has to go in. And if you are making a business plan for your vocational training based models, make sure you put a healthy chunk for marketing. Teacher costs can be controlled. We spoke about technology. You can replace some part of the teacher training, teacher hours through technology. You can minimize costs. They can be managed. You cannot manage marketing. Do not underinvest in that.
So basically, our research also, from what we've understood, is that marketing to students and marketing to employers, both are the largest costs. But somehow we are not in favor of a mandatory thing which looks very difficult. Every time private sector talks about government not making regulations and not sitting on our backs, and then we expect when things are tough for them to come down and reduce our costs here. So we still need to try and understand the answer. How do we make it more market driven, that this thing takes off on its own with the industry doing it on its own? One last question and then we'll...
If I land here, I would like to strengthen this point. See, government was mandating everything 20-30 years ago. Even employment exchange, you can't hire anyone without our exchange involved. We deregulated all that because the volume, supply and the quality was not being maintained when you mandate something. So I think it should be market driven if you're talking of a system. And every player understanding that he has to pay for services rendered by others, whether industry, the trainer is also rendering a service to him directly, so he should think of paying. So an educative mechanism where all stakeholders agree that I'll pay to you, you pay to him, you pay to him, and make a circle where the money is shared should be brought about.
Thank you very much. And